Hello, BookTube. It's Thursday and it's time for another book to film. And this time, excuse me, gonna discuss To Serve with Love by E.R. Braithwaite. Um, E.R. Braithwaite is, I think it's Edward Ricardo. Middle name is Ricardo. Apparently, he went by Ricky. He was born in 1912 in British Guiana. He served in the RAF during the Second World War and went to university. He was an engineer. That was his training, and he actually worked for a while doing that. he The book was written in 1959, and it's sort of autobiographical fiction. He became a teacher in inner city London, the east of London, because he couldn't find work anywhere else. And that's what sort of the book is about. It's him and about his search for work. He sort of he explains in here that he always thought of himself as British, English, because he was born and grew up in British Guiana. He was educated, well educated, and when he left sort of university and was demobilized, everybody thought, like he had letters of recommendation. They didn't think he'd have any problem locating work. So he gets this interview, and it's described in there. He gets this interview at a big firm, and he's living in London at this point. And he felt really good about the interview, getting it. He's living with an elderly couple that sort of took him in, and he began calling mom and pop, I think it was, or mom and dad. Uh, um, so he goes to the interview, and it's a sort of first sort of slam in his face of racism. Um, and it sort of floored him. And he just couldn't figure out why they even bothered. Like, once they found out he was black, why they even bothered doing the interview, because they clearly made up their minds beforehand. And that's what he found. A lot of times, like, he would call, like, other places that he had interviews with, he called up and told them that, I am black. And they'd sort of say, oh, well, the job's gone. So, and then in the course of the story, he meets someone in the park, just a random stranger, who says, you should go into teaching. And Ricky Braithwaite had sort of 2 year sort of plan. Like, he had enough money to live for 2 years. So this was getting near the end of it. I think it was about 18 months in. And he couldn't find anything, so he wrote off to London County Council for education, and he got a reply. And he had an interview, and it was like it went really well, and he was sent off to the school in East London. And it turns out to be a problem child school where sort of the students are rejects from other schools and nobody else wants to take them. There's no discipline there at all. They don't discipline them. The head, the principal, is sort of very open with this and saying that, we try to just, get them ready for when they leave when they're 16. So he gets the class sort of that's going to be graduating within the year. Because the previous teacher sort of is just sort of he's done a bunk. He's run off, and he meets with again with the racism throughout, with a little bit with the other staff. There's remarks, and sort of a little bit with the children, the kids, the students, young adults. And he's not making any way with anything. He's just like he's trying to teach them, but they're just, they're testing him and pushing back really hard, and he can't really push back. So he decides, he does lose his temper at one point, and he decides to change the whole aspect of the way he's going to do it. He's not going to treat them as children. He's going to treat them as adults, and sort of take the curriculum and almost throw it out the window, but just discuss with them, talk to them about things that are relevant to them. And slowly, over the months and months, he gains, some of their trust, not all of them. There's um, one student that is, definitely against him, and continues to. And uh, there's a big scene where there is a substitute PT teacher, physical training, gym teacher, um, and he sort of is picking on an overweight student of the class, and forces him to do a jump over um, sort of gymnastic horse. I forget, there's a special name for it, but it's a horse of some sort. Uh, and he sort of crashes down and wins himself, or knocks the wind out of himself. And one of the kids sort of picks up the broken piece of the leg and is gonna bash the teacher. So he comes back through. One of them goes to get Braithwaite, and he comes and talks the kid down, and has a talk with the teacher as well, and he learns the situation that the overweight student was sort of a whipping boy for the teacher, and but Braithwaite still feels that the reaction was totally wrong by the student. So he gets reprimanded, but not too badly. He apologizes, but another big incident sort of happens where one of the students stabs outside of the school, stabs another kid. And what happened is the student's grandmother does some silk weaving, I think it is, and she uses this special knife that she sends to the barbers to have sharpened. And it's the student's job to take it, and he shows this to another kid in the street, and the kid wants it, and he refuses to, so they get in a scuffle, and he stabs the kid a few times, I think, and he gets a bad cut across one of his hands, and it goes to court, and Braithwaite describes the sort of judicial system for juveniles, and it was clear that they had it against the school, and it was a bad mark for the school. The kid gets off with sort of reprimand, but he also sees other young people sort of before that his student gets up in the dock, sort of being tried and convicted or sent away, and it made a big impression on him. And and then there's a couple others, like there's another scene of where there's a couple other scenes. The one that's a Denim is sort of the leader, sort of the cool kid in the class, and he sort of because he's then taken over after the PT incident. He takes over the class, and he gets sort of the other kid talks him into having sort of a match, a boxing match. So the kid thinks he's gonna take this teacher's take this teacher down, but it turns out that Braithwaite, um, with one punch, sort of fells the student, wins him, knocks the wind out of him, but continues to sort of treat him well, and it's because of this that the student sort of has some respect for him, because he would have thought that he could have easily just pummeled him once he was down, and he didn't. The other sort of big incident too is where there's a half. One of the students has a white mother and a black father, and his mother dies, and Braithwaite sort of the kids are collecting for a wreath, and he says, "Oh, can I give some money in?" And they do, and they start talking, and they're saying, "Well, who's gonna take it to them?" And they sort of look at each other. "Well, we're not gonna take it. We can't go into, as they called it, a colored family's house, even though they grew up with the kid." But he, and again, that sort of told them about the racism aspect of things. But it turns out on the day of the funeral, most of the class shows up, and he's got quite a big class. It's like 40 some students, and most of them showed up. And throughout all this, he becomes romantically involved with one of the other teachers. She's a young woman, and she's from sort of kind of a well-to-do family, but new to teaching like he is. And he meets her parents, and they're not happy that she's dating a black guy. Again, the racism aspect, but they say they're not gonna stand in her way. So that's sort of where it ends. He decides to stay as a teacher because he's got nothing else. He's nowhere else to go. So he sort of feels that he's quite successful. He's learning, and he becomes successful with some of the students, and he thought it was worthwhile. And that's sort of where the story ends. And the story behind all this is that because Braithwaite couldn't find another job, he stayed on there, and then he winds up working for sort of social services, and then he gets on to a UN thing about education, and so he did a lot of stuff, and he was born in 1912, as I say, in British Guiana. He died just a few years ago in 2016 at the age of 104. And one thing that I found interesting, because I read this book many, many years ago, probably 35, 40 years ago, probably, well, I think it was after I saw the film sometime in the 80s, most likely. And I liked it. But I don't think the racism aspect sort of hit me as much, and I didn't quite understand it all until I came to the UK. Because there's an interesting thing that he talks about, that he, with that first job interview, and he couldn't figure out why they even bothered, having him come to the interview if they didn't want to have him. And they're all polite about it, though. Like, they're all, really, really polite. And they would never say it's racism, and things like that. It would never, ever come out. And that's the sort of British aspect of it. And it's like, after me being here, I think the reason why they would have taken him for the interview was they were looking for something other than his color to shoot him down. So if they could do that, then, it's clear, nothing to do with race. But since it was, they had they dealt with this, but really, really politely. And it's the one thing that I found, like, the racism was like, it's showing through that it was always there, but it was underneath the surface. It would have been denied. Nobody would have said anything about it. Um, and they would use like the politeness and other things to profess something else. They would profess one thing but do another, and that's sort of human nature to a certain extent. But I've since I've been here in the UK, I've found a lot of that, and it's sort of becoming sort of popular now in a different way, that people are professing outrage at something, but in practice they don't really bother, but they're verbally outraged, because you've got to show the verbal outrage, or the verbal how great this is, even though you don't do it. And it's a little more poignant at the moment, because some report on the government has just come out saying that there really isn't any institutional racism here in the UK, and it's like, oh yeah, right, really, again, trying to put it underneath the carpet. um, and it's yeah. But anyway, let's get to the film. To Serve with Love. um, I guess Sidney Poitier is the main. He's the Braithwaite character, even though they changed the name to Thackeray, Mark Thackeray, and they still have him born from British Guiana, and for the same reasons that he couldn't find another job, he goes into teaching. And the racial aspect, or the racism, is really, really toned down in the film. It's there, but it's only skimmed at superficially. In the book, it's quite. It really infuses the reason for Braithwaite to do things. It's paramount. It's one of the most important things, but it's just pushed aside and just skimmed at in the film. The film was done in 1967, filmed in the UK here. The script, was actually directed, produced, and the script was written by James Clavell, and that is the James Clavell from the is it the Asian Saga, or however it's called? But Shogun, Taipei, Noble House, King Rat, and so forth. Um, and They did it for a very, nobody wanted to really touch the product. He decided to take sort of no pay for it all, just a percentage, and so did Sidney Poitier. Take a percentage for it. I think Poitier took 10%, which it made a huge amount of money, and it cost like $750,000, I think, to make, or 800,000 or so to make. So, and yeah, and it has the hit song. It becomes a hit song, "To Serve with Love," sung by Lulu. She's in it. She's one of the students. All the students are about the age, like 14, 15, 16 years old. Judy Geeson is one of the main students who sort of falls in love with the character, and that was another aspect I missed in the book here, I'm mentioning, of how she sort of has an infatuation for the teacher, and he sort of how he deals with it, and that's in the movie as well. They move. It follows the plot really well. They don't go into the pre stuff of him going to job interviews, just knowing that it didn't happen, and he's getting letters saying that he's sending stuff out, he's applying for work, but he's not getting any replies back. They changed the order of a few scenes and incidents throughout. And at the end, they have him getting a job in the Midlands, I think it was, or in Yorkshire. And then he gives it up to stay for teaching. That didn't happen. He never got um, a um, a job offer. Uh, and on the film there's a couple commentaries. One is by a with some recordings of Braithwaite himself, talking about things and the movie. He wasn't too pleased with the film because he didn't think they dealt with it correctly, and they sort of had Poitier holding sort of at times a stick, basically, as if he's threatening the students. It was like a threatening gesture. Braithwaite didn't like that. He didn't like the ending with that he got a job and then decided to give it up, teaching. He just sort of didn't have any choice in reality. But anyway, there's that, and then there's Judy Geeson, who did was part of this with a couple of sort of film historians, and it was funny because they were saying, yeah, like, it's just not really, the racism was there and stuff, and like they're saying that none of the uh uh you know colleagues, teachers, saw as racist. And I'm just going, well, no, it's clearly in the film, like a couple incidences where he meets um uh teacher Mr. Weston, and the first time he meets him, he says, "Oh, you're the new sheep to the slaughter, or should I say, black sheep." Well, right there, that's clearly like he's trying to be funny, but it is a racist remark, and it was meant to be in the book as well. And then later he's talking about, oh, you got to get your magic out, or I should say your voodoo magic. So that's clear, but again, like I sort of think after being here, it's just like, human nature, and they're just trying to say that there is no racism, and it would never have happened in this kind of things. But they did move it out of the swinging 60, I mean the 50s to the swinging 60s. Um, but yeah, even though it's a great film, it's got well, like the one character I do like is Mr. Weston. He's he was no one here. I can't remember his name. See, my brain is a bit turned off here, but um, I like this character. I like the actor. He showed up in a lot of things, but he was well known for, I think, either the voice of some children's show here, which I'm not familiar with at all because they kept mentioning it in the commentaries. But I know him also from All Creatures Great and Small. He showed up like 3 or 4 different times, different characters, but I think he reprised the same character a couple times throughout the run of the original All Creatures Great and Small. And it has Patricia Rutledge, Mrs. Bucket. Oh, Mrs. Bouquet. And she also went on to do the Hetty Winthrop mysteries. Fabulous actress. And like the other ones were sort of, they went on to, a lot of them went on to other acting. Some did and some didn't. The younger ones. Judy Geeson did. She did a lot of stuff. Another one that I'm very familiar with is Ten Ringling Place, that she was on with Richard Attenborough. A fabulous film, but very dark. I actually met her at about 10 years, almost 10 years ago, I guess, at a convention in Milton Keynes. I was waiting for somebody else, and I didn't realize she was there. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll get a signed picture. And I was so surprised. Like, I don't think anybody was lining up to do anything, so I had a little chat with her, and she signed the picture. And from To Serve with Love, obviously. And then she gets up, comes around the table, and kisses me on the cheek. Don't know why, but hey, I wasn't gonna say no to it. um, but yeah, that was of sort of made my day. Uh, but yeah, and um, yeah, and it's weird that in the booklet here they have sort of some uh, reviews of it, contemporary reviews, the critical response. and most of them are just saying it's crap. The film is bad, badly made, no reality to it at all. And there's even stuff saying, oh, it's they're showing it wouldn't have happened and stuff like this, and then going again, it's like they think denying things that are real. Uh, and they were saying that they weren't wearing uniforms and stuff like that, but that was part of the thing, that it wasn't enforced, even though uniforms should have been. But that was all done in the book, and it's like, if they didn't like what how this was done, they're saying, oh, they just changed so quickly and all this kind of stuff. The children, but yeah, it's a film, so things have to be rushed, or the appearance of rushed, without length of time. It's a you got a little more passage or feel the passage of time in the book, but still a little tight. For time wise, for the changes that happen. But yeah, and well, the other thing, like, there's a little booklet, as I say in here. It's got a little essay that's quite interesting, in it. However, a glaring. This is a critique of this. Is they talk about the problem student Denham, but they don't call him Denham. They call him Dudley throughout the essay. He's Dudley. I don't know where they got that name. But anyway, where am I at here? 26 minutes. But no, it's a fabulous film, fabulous song, To Serve with Love. And it's like, even though I sort of, realized that it's light on the story regarding the racism part, but it's still a good film, even so. The book is good. It's not the best writing, at all. And even Braithwaite said he knew nothing about anything about writing, so he didn't know what to put in and how to do things. And he said all the instances are real because he kept a notebook every day. Once he started changing his style of teaching, he would try something one day and he would write what he did and what the responses were and how he could change and become a better teacher. And he had all these notebooks. And years later, I guess a few years later, he was looking at them and thought, I don't need them anymore. Yeah, he was going to throw them out, and he was going to or burn them. But his landlady stopped him and said, no, you need to write a book, and badgered him. And he finally wrote it and took it to a publisher, and they said, yeah, we'll publish it. And I found out, actually, from this, I wasn't aware that they actually made a sequel to this called To Serve with Love 2. It was actually, I think it was done for TV. Peter Bogdanovich directed it. It had Poitier in it, but he's transplanted to, I guess, 30 years later, he's transplanted to Chicago. Braithwaite partially did the screenplay, and somehow they had Judy Geeson's character and Lulu's character sort of there, I guess, opening it up. They were talking about that. They've never seen it, and they were just going, well, they didn't know how they were in Chicago as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just I suppose sometime I'll probably get around to seeing it, but it just doesn't sound, yeah, no, it's just, it was of its time, and I think that was it. And yeah, and there's lots of stuff about how they Poitier was really great. He wasn't uppity or anything, like he wasn't full of himself or anything like that. He just was like everybody else, like he treated their youngsters, their first acting, most of them were well, and he was there all the time. And I guess at the same time at Pinewood Studios, when they were doing the studio work, there was Sean Connery was filming a James Bond film at the time. I'm not sure which one. I'd have to look it up, but they all knew who Sean Connery was, and I think James Bond, obviously. And there was one scene that they kept taking where Poitier's character Thackeray comes in and throws his briefcase on the table and says, "Good morning," stuff like this, and they say back, "Good morning, sir." And they did this a few times, and one of the times walks in is Sean Connery, and he does the scene, and that sort of stunned them. And that was an interesting sort of anecdote. But yeah, no, it's yeah. If it's not something you've seen, you might know the song. Might be something if you're interested in sort of 1960s London type thing, East End. Get a flavor of that, I suppose, with this, and just fantastic acting, pretty well from everybody, but especially uh, Sidney Poitier. And it was in the same year he made three fabulous films that were released in 1967. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, where he's married to a white lady who she takes them home. Guess who's coming to dinner? And the parents are like shocked at this. And then John Ball was the writer of In Heat of the Night, where he plays. I think it's Chicago. I think he's from Chicago. Yeah, Chicago. Policeman going down to the deep south, probably Georgia. I can't remember now. It's a long time since I've seen it, and a long time since I read the book. Rod Steiger, and it's like he's Mr. Tibbs, and they call me Mr. Tibbs, and he's in the deep sort of racist South, trying to solve a murder. Fabulous, fabulous films. So anyway, that's my book to film this time. The next one is Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which I'll get to doing I think sometime this weekend. I'm still sort of working my way through some of the extras on the Blu-ray, so um, I'm not 100% sure what I have lined up for after that. I've got a few other ones that I had done previously, which I haven't really talked too much about, so I might do a few fillers because I think I want to read a couple other things in the meantime. But anyway, take care, BookTube, and I'll be back tomorrow with Friday Reads.